There's a quorum present. So at this point in time, since last meeting, this is our second meeting. Our last meeting, we did have some missing members. Is this working? Can people hear okay? Okay, thank you. We did have some missing members, so if I could, I'd like to go ahead and start with introductions. Why don't we start with Senator Sparks to my right, and then let's just go all the way down and just have everybody introduce themselves, please. Thank you, Senator Sparks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to serve on this committee. I apologize I wasn't able to make the initial meeting, but certainly proud to be here today. I am Senator Dan Sparks from southern Minnesota, represent the Austin-Elberly area.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize for missing the last meeting as well. Senator Eric Pratt, I represent Scott County, the communities of Prior Lake, Shakopee, and Jordan.
I'm Melissa Wickland, and I represent Bloomington and Richfield, Senate District 50.
Thank you. I'm Senator Scott Jensen. I represent Carver County. Thank you.
I'm Andrea Todd Harlan, and I'm the Committee Administrator for Health and Human Services and Finance and Policy.
Mr. Chair, I'm Senator Matt Klein. I represent District 52, which is South St. Paul, Mendota Heights, Inver Grove Heights, and I'm a physician.
I'm Senator Mary Kiffmeyer, and I represent the eastern part of Sherburne County, Big Lake, and Elk River, and the eastern part of Wright County, Otsego, Albertville, St. Michael, Hanover, and 14 homes in Dayton. And Mr. Chair, it was my delight to have been here at the last meeting. Thank you.
I'm Senator Rich Draheim from South Central Minnesota, representing Le Sueur, Scott, and Rice counties.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for having me on this committee, and thank you, members. Like Senator Pratt, I was sorry to miss the first meeting, but our excuse is we were in Germany and just couldn't make it. For those who I haven't met, I'm Senator Nick Frentz from District 19, which is Mankato, North Mankato, St. Peter, and all of Nicollet County, and very much looking forward to this.
In Human Services. Attendance, thank you so much. This is our second meeting of the Healthcare Consumer Access and Affordability Select Senate Committee. Today we'll be exploring the topic of prescription drugs as we continue to examine the cost of healthcare and how it is that we might try to bend the cost curve downwards. Having said that, today's topic on prescription drugs will be included a couple of times during the next 5 months as we see about different viewpoints. Today we'll have a robust discussion with three extremely highly qualified individuals researching and working in the field of pharmaceuticals. Having said that, our first item on the agenda is for Mr. Stephen Schondelmeyer, a professor of pharmaceutical economics at the College of Pharmacy at the University of Minnesota, to present to us. Dr. Schondelmeyer, if you join us, and please introduce yourself. Thank you.
Senator Jensen, thank you, and members of the committee, thank you for your time and the opportunity to present. I'm Stephen Schondelmeyer. I'm a professor at the University of Minnesota in pharmaceutical economics. I am a pharmacist. I am an economist. I've studied this marketplace for about 45 years. I have databases on virtually every drug on the market and their prices and behaviors for the last 35 or 40 years. And I track this market at all levels: consumer, physician, pharmacist, wholesaler, PBM, manufacturer, insurer, kind of all the players, and have tracked this market. I'm going to give you an overview and some observations of things going on in the marketplace, and then I'll, at the end, give some suggestions of areas that might need attention and direction. I'm going to talk about pharmaceutical spending overall and about markets, monopolies, and bending the curve, which is kind of the goal of this committee. And I'll do it from the perspective of the pharmaceuticals involved, although I also examine and look at the role of pharmaceuticals in the broader healthcare system. Now, I always like to ask questions of my students, and I'll do that briefly of you. These are rhetorical. You don't have to answer, but you can if you want. Is there anyone here that's never been sick a day in your life? If so, let me, raise your hand, okay? Probably nobody can legitimately raise their hand. Second question I would ask, is there anyone who has not needed or used a prescription drug ever in your life? Again, it's hard to find in America someone who has not ever had a prescription drug. Even if you're born in a hospital, prescription drugs are administered from day one. to you. So they're essential. The point of these questions is to remind us that virtually everyone needs, has used, or will use drugs in their lifetime. There is a universal demand for prescription drugs. Very few other things in society have a universal demand. Now, in its broadest context, food and housing do have universal demand also. But the point of this is to say drugs are different than most markets, different than most goods and commodities and most things we buy. And so the things that we assume work in markets other places, we know from experience and we see over time that they don't work the same in pharmaceuticals. So the market for drugs is unique. First of all, on the supply side, when we have a manufacturer, someone who discovers a new drug, we value that, we appreciate that, we applaud them, and we award them a monopoly through either a patent or exclusivities or simply through FDA only approving one product until another one can come along. So there are monopolies established in this arena, and monopolies don't price using normal market mechanisms. They behave very differently. So drugs have a monopoly, and for a considerable period of time. These days, a company may have 15 to 25 or more years on the market with their product because a single tablet doesn't have just one patent or one exclusivity. I can show you tablets or capsules around which there are 20 or 25 different patents, and they don't all run simultaneously. They may run at different sequences, and so the net effective patent life is what's important, not the patent life of a single patent at a single point in time. But patents are important. We use that to reward innovation. There is question about, are we awarding too many patents these days, and I'll get back to that in a minute. Second, there are extremely high barriers to entry into this marketplace for a pharmaceutical company. The cost is enormous to find a truly new therapeutic agent and bring it to the market. Now, there are many agents that come to the market as new drugs that are simply a new strength or a new dosage form or a new combination that also get patents that really don't cost billions and billions of dollars like you're going to hear about from others perhaps. But there are high barriers to entry. Next, resources are not easily transferable. I can't take a candy manufacturing company that makes M&Ms and convert that to making medications, even though really that M&M looks like little pills sometimes. But the process is different, but I have to get FDA approval of the manufacturing facility, of the drug product, and many, many other steps that candy manufacturer doesn't have to go through. So even though one might have the equipment to stamp out some tablets, and you may be able to buy aspirin and package it and sell it as aspirin tablets, it's not easy to get into the pharmaceutical marketplace. And from the time when you start planning until you can bring a product to market could easily be 2 to 5 years, even after you have the molecule, in terms of setup and manufacturing and other things. Also, this marketplace, and I'll touch on these, and you need to watch for these. There are many, many what I call reverse perverse incentives in this marketplace, where actually the decision maker makes money from choosing the higher cost option rather than the lower cost option. One of the classics of this, there are many, but one of the classics were drugs covered under Medicare Part B that are administered often in the physician's office. And back in the 2000s, we saw that there were drugs that, as drugs came on the marketplace, they competed by having a higher price because that meant that the outpatient clinic or physician's office that administered the drug had a higher margin from a $2,000 drug than a $1,000 drug. And so when drugs were similar, there was and this happened, there were more of the higher priced drugs prescribed rather than the lower priced drugs. So that's a reverse perverse incentive. Or in some cases, we chase rebates today. We talk about rebates as if those are discounts off of drugs. Rebates aren't always passed on to the consumer or even the end payer and don't always lower the net cost in the marketplace. There are cases where a drug may give a 50% rebate back to the PBM or to the Medicaid program, but the price is so high that even with a 50% rebate, it costs more than a therapeutically equivalent FDA-approved generic that is much less. So again, I can get you a lot of rebate dollars. It may not get you a lower net cost. So they're reverse perverse economics. And then pharmaceuticals, also different than any other market perhaps, require a permission slip or a prescription. The doctor has to write a prescription. So this is a marketplace that has limited access because as consumers, we don't know which drugs we need and what's the safest or most effective. And we rely upon the medical profession and the health professions to help us make wise decisions with drugs. But that makes it, again, a different marketplace. The decision maker is not the consumer, the one who takes the medication. And often we also have a marketplace that's insured and insulated. That is, most people have some type of insurance, so even the physician doesn't know the cost. The patient really doesn't know the cost. Somebody else who's paying the bill is different from the decision maker physician and different from the patient who takes the medication. So we have a marketplace that's very, very disjointed. And because of that, it's hard for this marketplace to behave with normal market related behaviors. I want to say up front, I do believe in markets, but I'll talk about a lot of distortions and problems in this pharmaceutical marketplace that I think need to be bounded, and we need to monitor this to make sure the market works properly and to fix or correct the market mechanisms that aren't working. So how much of the healthcare dollar is spent on drugs? Now, you may hear from a lot of people. Some of the best health economists in the country will tell you certain numbers. This shows the federal budget, and in 2015, we spent $3.2 trillion on healthcare as a whole. And you can divide that pie up into various pieces here. Some of the largest pieces: hospitals, physicians, dental services, home health, nursing homes. And then we get around to pharmaceuticals or prescription drugs. This says 9.6%. This number is accurate. I work with the Office of the Actuary. I know their methods. I know how they do it. They're very diligent in estimating that number. But most people don't read the definition of what they include in prescription drugs. This prescription drug piece of the pie is only outpatient prescription drugs you pick up at the corner drugstore. This doesn't include most specialty drugs, doesn't include drugs administered in the doctor's office, in the hospital outpatient. There are many other drugs that are used in the marketplace that aren't included in that piece of the pie. They're in each of the other pieces of the pie. So what I would tell you is I've taken the time to look at all of the other pieces of the pie and estimate how much is spent on drugs in each of the other pieces, and then add up a total percent spent on prescription drug. Nationwide, we would estimate about 17.5% to 20% of the healthcare dollar is spent on prescription drugs. And actually, it's closer to 20%. I'll show you some numbers that suggest it's even higher than that in a minute. But the point is, drugs aren't just the 10% we often focus on. Those are only outpatient prescription drugs. Those are largely about 85 to 90% of those outpatient prescription drugs are the generics that are dispensed through insurance programs and community pharmacies throughout the state, throughout the country. But this doesn't include the specialty drugs, the high-tech drugs, drugs administered in other physicians' offices, hospitals, dental services, and other places. The nation's insurers have estimated how much of our healthcare dollar do we spend on various pieces. And the first couple of pieces are their operating costs and their net margins. Those total to about 20%. Inpatient healthcare services are 15.8%. Outpatient services, 19.8%. Physician services are about 22%. And what's left, they estimate that in 2014, 22.1% of the money spent by insurers for healthcare is spent on prescription drugs. Now, look across. Is there any other piece bigger than that? Not in this estimate from insurers in the commercial marketplace. Now, first thing to note is we're spending more on prescription drugs than we do on physician services. And this is national data. I've looked at Minnesota data in various ways and concluded that we have a similar pattern in Minnesota. About 20% of our total health spending is actually prescription drugs, if you take into account prescription drugs in every piece of the pie, rather than looking just at those outpatient retail prescription drugs. I've had the good fortune to work with the Minnesota Department of Health and with Stefan Gildemeister, the health economist, and the Minnesota's all-payer claims database to get a sense of how much total is spent on prescription drugs in Minnesota and kind of where is it. We did a report to a Senate committee a year or two ago, and we can provide that if you haven't seen that or don't have it. In summary, it shows that this shows the number of prescriptions. The blue box are prescriptions through community retail pharmacies. The part that we talked about was the 10%. The green box are a number of claims for drugs paid for on the medical benefit side of the health care, but they're for drugs on the medical benefit side. This is number of claims. This second slide shows the dollars spent. And what it shows in 2013, we were spending $7.5 billion on drugs in Minnesota, and about a third of that was not in the retail sector, but it was in, again, physicians' offices, hospital outpatient, specialty pharmacies, and other settings out there. So, in fact, the fastest growing part, note that the medical drug spend grew nearly 30% in this 5-year period. The pharmacy drug spend grew 13%. So the fastest growth is in those non-retail outlets, and they're in parts that aren't reflected in that 10% number that we often hear about or look at. This slide shows the average cost per claim. The blue, again, is for the pharmacy outpatient claims. The green is for drugs on the medical side of the benefit. Notice it's a higher cost per claim, and it's growing more rapidly over time. You'll see the wide haystack or sawtooth pattern. Actually, that's driven largely by vaccines and vaccinations, particularly school and flu and school vaccinations. They occur in the fall. There are large numbers of them. They're fairly low cost compared to other claims. So that green line kind of shows the variation that occurs, but the dark green line has smoothed that out. So how does this relate to prescription drug claims? I also have the privilege of helping to manage the University of Minnesota's health benefit plan and the drug benefit, and I have access to the data. First of all, let me tell you, I don't have access to any HIPAA violating information. I don't know which patient gets what drug by name. I can't relate it to patients, so it's completely protected in terms of confidentiality and privacy. But I look at the data in terms of how can we manage our health benefit plan to get the most health care we can for our employees while using our resources wisely. That's a charge that I take very seriously, and the university's health benefits program takes seriously, and I think you as legislators take seriously in terms of your role for the state. So let me give you some trends at Minnesota. First, I'm going to show you the total cost per claim. And this is the average cost of a brand name drug over time from 2004 to early 2017. Now, the first question I ask my students is, do you notice a trend line here? Okay, not too hard to notice that trend line. Now, the last few years, there's been some variation. Some of that is because we've had a few really high-cost items come in, like the hepatitis C drugs, and they get used heavily for a while, and then the use has dropped off. And so we see some variation. But overall, we're up to $624 per 1 month supply of a brand name drug. That's the actual amount we pay at the university for prescriptions for our employees and their family members. Now, if a generic drug happens to be prescribed and is appropriate for that patient, the average cost is $38. That's $38 versus $624. And we cover selectively over-the-counter drugs, drugs that you could buy. And you might say, well, why would you cover over-the-counter drugs? Well, we do that because often if we didn't cover the over-the-counter drug, the patient would go into their doctor and say, hey, doc, my plan only has a $10 copay, and if I want to go buy this drug over the counter, it's going to cost me $25 or $30. Can't you prescribe something for me that'll only cost me $10? And usually that happens. So we decided rather than have the patient and have the risk of the patient getting a much higher cost item that would be prescribed, we'll cover the generic or the OTCs much like we do the generics, and the cost is about the same, about $41 per 1 month supply. So we found that to be a cost-saving factor. Now, I show here the average cost per drug claim, but I tell my students the average isn't really what you need to look at because this marketplace is very different Brand names behave very different than generics, and they behave different than OTC, and you need to understand the difference. And then there's a third category called specialty we'll get to in just a moment. Now this is the trend line for those specialty medications. These are medications that might be for injectables administered in the physician's office or self-administered by the patient, for multiple sclerosis, for rheumatoid arthritis, for migraines. It may include the HIV drugs in some cases. And this shows our average cost for a 1 month supply of a specialty medication is $5,454. That's $5,454. That's over $60,000 a year for one medication if a patient's on that chronically. $60,000 a year. That's higher than the median income in Minnesota or at the University of Minnesota. Now we can compare that back with our brand name. Remember the red line used to look really tall on that previous slide. Now when we compare it to specialty drugs, it's pretty small. And then the generics are even further below that. Just quickly, I want you to look at some ratios here. Look at the brand to generic ratio. A brand costs 11 times as much as the generic in the marketplace. A specialty costs about 9 times what the brand does. And if you look top to bottom, just for comparisons, a specialty to a generic is 144-fold different. Now, I'm not saying that there's not always a generic you can use in place of a specialty, nor should you. But it's helpful to look at the relative cost structure here and the relative price structure. Specialty claims, notice they did take a noticeable bend up. We talk about bending curves. Specialty drugs really accelerated in or about 2010, and they've been going up quite dramatically in price. And going up much faster than our economy, much faster than income of individuals, much faster than the income or profits of corporations, or much faster than the state budget has gone up. So that means that drugs overall, and especially in particular, are taking a bigger bite out of your wallet as a legislature, out of my wallet as an individual, out of corporations' revenue and profit. So drugs are taking a much bigger bite. Specialty drugs have grown 441% in a decade. 441% growth in a decade. That's in terms of cost. That's not expenditures. That's just cost per unit, cost per 1 month supply of medications. Of course, every drug wants to be a specialty drug, or as we can see, they're often high-cost drugs. You remember Daraprim, that was Martin Shkreli, and you remember his smirk on TV and how proud he was that he could raise the price 5,000% and get away with it. Not for this reason, but for other reasons, he's been called to task for various things. HIV drugs have gone up dramatically in price. Many old drugs, insulin, Acthar gel, EpiPen, have gone up dramatically in price. Many orphan drugs are going up dramatically. I won't dwell on it, but there's an FDA unapproved drug initiative, and FDA took one drug that was on the market for a low-cost, colchicine, for treating gout, and they knocked all the generics off the market and left one product on the market with an exclusive relationship, and the price suddenly went up about 100-fold. No surprise. We had a monopoly. What happens when you have monopoly pricing? Higher prices. Colchicine, Ishapel, Cyprine, and I could list a number of other products of this type. Also, there's become what we call single-source generics. Generic, we usually think of generic as off-patent, there are no exclusivities, and it's been on the market, and there are a number of companies competing, and the price goes down. And that often, usually happens with generics, but not always. But what we see now is there's some generics that have been on the market long enough that they bid down to an equilibrium price in an economic sense, but they aren't large enough market volume to sustain 3, 4, 5 different companies. So 1, 2 company drops out, another company may be cited by FDA for manufacturing problems, their plant closed down, and suddenly one company finds that they're the only one marketing that product in the US. And what happens when they're the only one marketing it? The price spikes up. We've seen for drugs on the market between 1980 and 2003, I just finished a report for AARP on generics and their price increases. About 15 to 20% of the drugs on the market in that time frame had more than 100% price increase in the last 5 years. More than doubled in the last 5 years. And these are generics. Many of those are generics that found themselves as the only generic company on the market, no other competitors, so they have this functional monopoly. And you might say, well, Steve, doesn't the market work? You know, other companies can come in the market, start making it, lower the price. Well, in theory it does, but remember you have to have approval from FDA to come onto the marketplace. It takes a generic company probably 2 to 3, 4 years from the time they know that there's a market opportunity to get a product developed and ready to send to FDA, and then FDA's review time has been long, on the order of 2 to 3 years to get that reviewed. So it may be 3 to 5 years before the competitor could ever come in the market. In the meantime, the single source generic knows, hey, we're the only one here. Nobody else has permission to make a generic. We can charge whatever we want until others can get in the market 3 to 5 years later. So yes, the market works in the long run, but in the short run, we overpay. Much like when we have a shortage of gas or other commodities, and we see price spikes in the marketplace and we get outraged. Well, we're seeing that for drugs too. So the price spikes are these. I'm going to give just a few quick examples, and then I'll give some solutions. One is a drug, verapamil. This is used in the hospital, and there have been shortages of this drug. First of all, its price had grown from 31 cents to $2.08. But wait, that's not the punchline. There was a shortage of this drug in 2013 and 14. What happened to the price during that shortage period? Look at that increase. We would be outraged if that was food, if that was gasoline, if that was the price of utilities or water. But it happened to drugs. We haven't changed anything. 420% price increase. EpiPen, we saw a dramatic increase in price. And this is a great drug. It's been around. Epinephrine's been around forever. But look at what's happened to the price. And this is the price we pay at the university. This is what it costs us per prescription total for this EpiPen. It had a 700% increase in a decade, 400% increase in 5 years. Our spending, if I looked at every EpiPen we paid for, and if the price hadn't gone up from 2011, the price increase after 2011 cost us $1 million out of a $40 million drug budget. So we had to spend $1 million extra. We hadn't anticipated. We didn't know it was coming. And you didn't give us an extra $1 million from the legislature to cover that. That's $1 million increase, totally unexpected, and that we had to deal with. And other employers, other payers, the state health plan had the same issue, other payers. Now, we thought, great news, AviQ, a competitor, is going to come back in the market. Yay, the market's working. Well, what price did that product come in at? Not at $730, but at $400 or $4,500. Is that competition? Is that the way competition works? This again speaks to the fact that competition in the market in pharmaceuticals doesn't work the way you think it does. And I can show you many examples like this. Now, another drug, essential to life, insulin, Humulin. And there are 3 different companies making insulin. There is no generic of insulin because it's a biological product, although it was approved as a new drug application before we had biological license applications. There are no generic equivalents, but these drugs have gone up dramatically in price in the last decade, and particularly the last 4 or 5 years. The annual cost of therapy with Humulin U-500 is over $10,000 a year. This was in 2014. Today, it's up around $18,000 to $20,000 per year for U-500 insulin. We saw a 13% increase in 4 years. That's tolerable. A 75% increase in 2 years. That's irritating. A 200% increase in 2 years. That's just unexcusable. Now, total 461%. Now let me ask you, when a drug like insulin has a 200% increase in price, does your diabetes get 200% better? No, it's the same drug. It works the same way. You just have to pay more out of pocket for it to access it. And EpiPen, insulin are about life and death. These aren't symptomatic therapies that, oh, I don't need it this week, I'll pay for food this week. No, you have to have your insulin. You have to have your EpiPen when it's needed, or you will face a severe crisis.
Excuse me, Dr. Schondelmeyer. Yeah. I think this might be an excellent opportunity for us to give your voice just a break for a minute.
Yes.
And because I did glance ahead, and the rest of your presentation commands our interest as well. So if it's okay with you, could we just stop and allow question and answer?
Absolutely.
I think that might be helpful. So having said that, are there any questions from any of the senators? Senator Draheim.
Mr. Chairman, going back to your EpiPen example, why do the insurance providers pay the $4,500 instead of the $730 when the competitor came on board?
Well, the competitor came on at $4,500, so we didn't want to pay that. We, at the University of Minnesota, as the employer payer working with our PBM, we said we won't pay for the branded EpiPen, we'll only pay for the generic now that there is one, and that was at $300. But even that isn't the relative price. It was at $100 just a couple of years before that. So yes, when we have an opportunity and an option, we do take it, but when EpiPen was out there before the generic came on, we didn't have a choice.
Follow up.
Senator Draheim.
Okay, thank you. So would most insurance companies pay for that $4,500, or what market were they trying to go after coming into the market at $4,500 versus $700 or $200?
I wouldn't want to quantify it, but many, what happens with prescription drug plans are a large employer has a human resources department and somebody in health benefits, and they have to manage all of the medical benefit, drugs, hospitals, everything, and they contract with someone called a PBM usually to run their drug benefit program. They hope that the PBM will act in their best interest. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and they delegate that. But there are so many drugs, there are like 80 to 100,000 line items of drugs out there that can be used. Nobody inside a company, let alone managing the drug benefit, and most physicians, most pharmacists can't keep track of all of those, monitor them. So the market is so crowded, so busy, so many transactions and different prices, it's hard to monitor and regulate. The marketplace kind of lets things go through until they find them. I've been working with the Minnesota Health Action Group. It's a collection, the larger group has about 50 major employers in Minnesota who are members, and I work with their health benefits officers, and I've been educating them to issues like this so that they do pay attention, they do ask questions, they do make the wise choice when they can. But largely, it was because they just didn't have time and didn't focus on it, but they realize it's costing them a lot now, and they need to pay attention.
Thank you, Dr. Schondelmeyer. Senator Draheim.
Is that really save the company's money? What's your opinion on them? Or is it a case-by-case basis?
I think PBMs provide many valuable services and functions. And we couldn't operate our health system without some of those functions. But PBMs also have what I would call shell games or black boxes, where some things are hidden or not known, or where they have what I would call inherent conflicts of interest. Think of this. We have a PBM contract with pharmacies throughout the state of Minnesota to provide prescription drugs to the University of Minnesota employees. And they do that. But a PBM may say, well, we also have a mail order that will compete with those pharmacies. Now, we're going to make sure we don't overpay the pharmacies. Who's going to make sure we don't overpay the mail order that the PBM owns? Or the PBM owns a specialty pharmacy, and both PBMs consider specialty pharmacy and mail order pharmacies as profit centers, and it's a major source of their revenue, along with rebates and other things. So there are some areas where they are in conflict with the other players that they're trying to monitor their price on. As much as we can, we try in contractual language to eliminate those conflicts of interest, but the standard contracts with PBMs don't necessarily eliminate those. So PBMs are valuable. They provide many very useful services, but there are some black boxes, some hidden incentives and revenues that aren't widely seen by most major employers even that contract with those PBMs.
Thank you, Dr. Schondelmeyer. Next question, Senator Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Dr. Schondelmeyer. I come back to your initial slide on the ways that this marketplace is different from other marketplaces, and I would add the point that you alluded to, which is that we have sort of a moral obligation with these products as a society to ensure that people who need insulin get insulin. Not the case, say, with television sets and so forth. And so I want to really make sure I understand specifically with the EpiPen and insulins, because I think those are clarifying cases where there really is an immediate medical and absolute life-saving need to make sure that we provide those medications to patients. I want to understand fully why those prices rose so dramatically over the last few years. You have them classified under old drugs and said their prices rose because of that. EpiPen, I think, had a monopoly for a while, and I think I understand why that raised the price. But you said the insulins still had 3 different manufacturers, and the price was rising dramatically nevertheless. Right. Can you illuminate that for me?
Sure. Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a good and astute question. Just because we have 4 or 5 different brands of a product competing for the same treatment of the same disease state, in the physician's mind, they think through, I have these 5 options, which one will I use? And they think through first safety, efficacy of the drug, and then to the degree the physician is aware of cost, they try to take that into account. But I point out a physician does not know the actual cost of a drug. The contracts for rebates between manufacturers and PBMs specify that the true rebate and true net cost can't be disclosed to anyone, including the physicians making the decision of which drug will be used. I think your question, though, alludes to, even if we have several brands of a product, another market that I was going to get to is the multiple sclerosis market. We've had started with only 1 or 2 drugs to treat MS, and now we fortunately have 8 or 9, 10 different drugs. But as those drugs came in the market, instead of competing and prices going down, we've seen the price of multiple sclerosis drugs go up 6-fold over the last decade. Went up 6-fold. Now, is that competition? Well, they're competing in one sense. They're competing to get the doctor to prescribe it. They're competing to get patients on their drug. But they're not competing on price. The market insulates them from competing on price. Again, because we've awarded a monopoly and exclusivities that go on for long, long periods of time, and you don't have market-based prices when you have monopolies. Now, I'm not questioning, we want to reward the true new innovations, but we have to realize we've created monopolies, and we can't expect market behaviors when you've told the market, no, you can work as a monopoly. And the EpiPen itself really didn't have a patent on, or any exclusivity on epinephrine, the basic ingredient. It had a patent on the delivery device, the way in which it's administered. And the AviQ, the new product, has a patent on the delivery device, which some would argue is even more convenient than the EpiPen, and it also talks to you. It says, first take the cap off, slam it on your leg, push this button. It does. It may be helpful to talk to patient, walk the patient through it, but it costs 7 to 8-fold as much as the old standard EpiPen. And frankly, we could buy epinephrine and draw it up in a syringe in the doctor's office, and it would cost you about $20.
Thank you, Dr. Schondelmeyer. Dr. Frenz, Senator Frenz.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Professor Schondelmeyer, I'm with Senator Draheim that I can't help but notice we're talking about a competitor choosing to go through FDA approval to enter the market at $4,500 to compete with the product that originally cost $101 and now $730. So am I hearing you correctly that one of the reasons a manufacturer might do that is they feel it won't be discovered, lost in the jumble of the 80,000, or that somehow they'll benefit from a conflict of interest at least long enough for them to recoup their investment?
Those are part of it. There are many other factors. They realize the market itself is dull, that we've separated the decisions so much that the physician makes a decision without knowing price. The employer hires a PBM without knowing all of their financial relationships and transparencies. Overall, the PBM probably benefits the employer, but there may be select areas where the PBM uses higher cost drugs to make their revenue and their margins. And it's hard for even an employer to evaluate, where am I getting the best deal and am I using my resources wisely? What I can tell you is, if we were saving money, if the market was really working, we wouldn't see drug prices going up double or 5-fold or 10-fold like we do, and for common old drugs that could actually be made for a very small part of the cost. So we have a system that the regulation almost protects the players in the market from competition.
Thank you, Dr. Schondelmeyer. Thank you, Senator Klein. Senator Pratt.
Part of, you know, someone like me who's a layperson in this area really doesn't understand. But I mean, I do understand economics. I understand that the market forces aren't working right in a monopoly. But when I look at Verapamil, right, the increases were going, you know, it was increasing prior to the shortage. The accelerated increase continued after the shortage was seen, and you know, if it were truly shortage related, we would have seen those prices come down post shortage. We talked a little bit about epinephrine. We've talked a little bit about insulin. What I see is an increase in demand, and how much of that is truly the patient demanding the specialty drugs, but also I'd like to understand a little bit more of what's bending that cost curve, you know, and the specialty drug and the, you know, just the inflection point at about October 2010 to January 2011 is striking. Yeah. I don't know that we've really got into what, as we've gone through and listened to the rationale from the manufacturers, they're not going to say, well, we've got a monopoly and everybody can just pay whatever we want them to. What are the drivers for that cost increase? I'm still not sure that I understand that aspect of it.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Dr. Schondelmeyer, please.
Well, that's a good question. I think primarily that's a question you need to address back to the manufacturers. Why are you raising your price and what's driving it? I personally have listened to, either in person or on C-SPAN or other things, the hearings that have been conducted with various drug companies that were called before congressional committees. I've been an expert in lawsuits involving economics of drugs probably about 75 times, and through that I've had the opportunity to see the inside data in most all of the major companies throughout the U.S. and kind of their cost structures behind it. Often it isn't cost-driven per se. Yes, costs go up, but they don't explain a doubling of price or a tenfold increase in price in most cases. There may be some increase in demand for some products, but overall the number of prescriptions has started to level out. We haven't seen dramatic growth in number of prescriptions. It's been in the cost per prescription that's primarily driving up the expenditures for pharmaceuticals. And it's been dramatic increases in the prices of new drugs being approved on the market. Now, many of these are for fairly small populations, and some of them bring wonderful cures, like the hepatitis C drug. We can almost cure a hepatitis C patient, whereas their previous options would have been to continue with hep C and have a liver transplant or die prematurely. So there are some miracles, but not all of these drugs we've talked about are that much of a life and death. From all I can tell and the sources I've seen, the information I've seen inside companies, the companies' arguments before congressional committees, I don't think they fully have justified why those cost increases are there. I don't think it's not cost of the chemicals, it's not cost of goods. Yes, they spend a lot on research and development, but even when we factor in research and development hasn't gone up double or 100-fold in the last 5 years. So all of those things that they normally will argue and say these are things that add to our cost, true, they add to their cost, but they don't explain the level of pricing that we're seeing. And the companies need to explain it.
Senator Pratt?
I'm processing. There was a lot.
Dr. Schondelmeyer, I'm going to do a follow-up on Senator Pratt's question as to Why the inflection point at the inflection point? And it takes me back to one of your first slides where you talked about the market for drugs being unique, and you referenced the monopoly, the high barriers to market entry, the resources not easily transferable. Yeah. It makes me think of our utilities. It makes me think of Excel. Those are the same kinds of things. It's a monopoly. It's hard to get in. You don't, you don't start a new electrical company in your garage. That kind of a thing. What's the solution?
Well, you've kind of set up one possibility. First, let me lay on one other thing. Also, legislatively, federally, and at the state level, we have classes of drugs that are either protected classes of drugs or drugs that are mandatorily covered under insurance programs. And I understand why we do that. I support that. We need to make sure patients with mental health or patients with epilepsy or patients with cancer have access to therapies and the latest of therapies. I understand why we do it. But again, when you pass a law that says this must be covered by every insurer, paid for by every employer, covered under health benefits plans, a drug company selling a product knows that. And in fact, when I look at the price increases are more dramatic in the covered mandatory classes than they are in the classes that aren't mandatory. I don't know what the answer is. Well, I'll give you some possibilities. But just realize, while trying to solve one problem over here, we do create other problems. And what happens, there are many services, goods and services, that fit a certain model that we call the public good model, that we as a society have an interest in making sure that this good or service is available to everyone. Our parks, our highway systems, our utilities, things like that. We want to make sure everybody has access to those. And how do we manage those and the cost of those in? We don't say the companies can charge whatever they want. We do have a regulatory process that does rate reviews and evaluates, is that a reasonable increase in utility charges? It doesn't necessarily set the price, but it reviews what's a reasonable increase. Actually, the Canadian government for a number of years has operated what they call the PMPRB, the Patent Medicine Price Review Board. When a drug company is going to launch a product in the Canadian market, they have to submit their pricing information to this board. The board reviews it and evaluates with appropriate academic and economic information, is this a reasonable price for this drug and versus the alternatives? And if it is, then they allow it to come on the market and at the price that they've asked for. Only a handful of cases do they find to be out of bounds, and then that board sits down with the drug company and negotiates a reasonable price and says, we find this to be excessive for these reasons, and here's what we think is reasonable. They negotiate a price, and to the best of my knowledge, every product has eventually come on the market in Canada, but with some evaluation of the pricing. And a second thing, in addition to new prices coming on, they also evaluate price increases on an ongoing basis of drugs on the market. And if they see a price that's gone up above a certain threshold, then that company has to come in and be accountable to that board for why did you raise the price that much? And show us the data. You know, if you have bona fide reasons for this, show us, and we will authorize then use of that price. But if you don't, we're going to hold you accountable for that price. So a price regulation review board, I think, could do that. That could be implemented at a state level. It could be done at a federal level. The pharmaceutical market, there is no simple silver bullet that's going to solve these problems. There are some things we can begin to do to make it work better. Many of the things that would be best to make this work probably need to be done at the federal level, but that doesn't mean you should sit by at the state and say, oh, I can't do anything, throw my hands up. There are things you can begin to do, and some states are beginning to do that. So one is a rate regulation, much like we do with the utilities.
Thank you, Dr. Schondelmeyer. To that point, it strikes me that many of the insurance carriers, I would think, must find themselves betwixt and between a rock and a hard place. A price goes up mid-season. They don't have any ability to necessarily change it. They've already disseminated a formulary to their insureds. The physicians aren't aware of the prices. Right. I know I'm supposed to, as a physician, dislike and speak against prior authorization techniques, but it is a prior authorization that sometimes when that comes back to me, I get pushback on a script. I'll be, for the first time, informed that EpiPens just tripled in price. Or let's take something where there is more competition. It might be that a statin drug just bumped up. Right. And I won't know that until the prior auth comes back and said, well, we've just within the last 3 weeks already sent you a fax that said that you have to have a prior auth in order to prescribe compound X. Yeah. So then the prior auth gets me thinking, oh, well, maybe I better consider some options. So I do see the prior auth as a tool for the insurance company to communicate to me that something's happened. Is that a reasonable mechanism, do you think?
Well, let me back up a minute. Prior auth, one of many uses of prior auth could be what you described. The way we use it at the university is we use it for safety concerns. If we can screen and identify a case where a patient may be using it in an unsafe way, we require prior authorization before that proceeds. Or effectiveness and appropriateness. So those are the first two things, safety and appropriateness and effectiveness. There are also times when it can be used for cost management and cost controls, as you've described. In general, we try not to do that at the university, but we do that in other ways, but not through prior authorization. But prior auth, that's one tool. Again, this gets back to a situation, the PBM, another regulation we have is that they are supposed to set their formularies and not change it mid-year. And I support that. I understand why we do that. It helps the doctor know what the patients can get. It helps the patient know what they're buying when they buy an insurance plan. But then that locks the insurance company in so they can't negotiate mid-year if the drug company raises their price to change that pricing. So again, we have to realize this dynamic economic market, we've squeezed a lot of places, but we haven't done anything to evaluate and keep the cost, the price within bounds or within reason. And so we may need to find some ways to gently squeeze back and evaluate price in the effect of these other behaviors. Several have commented on the inflection point of the specialty drugs. I track brand name drugs as a separate market and generics and then specialty and their percent change over time. What I can tell you, before every piece of major health legislation, in the year or two before it gets passed, there's a lot of saber rattling going on in Washington, like with Medicare Part D, before changes to our Medicaid program, before the Affordable Care Act, before each piece of major legislation, we see drug companies' prices go up more dramatically. I think they have to explain it, but what I figure out by watching them and hearing them talk is that if they're going into a period where they might actually have their prices regulated in some way, they want to ramp it up as high as they can, so when they do start getting squeezed with regulated prices, they'll be on the top of the mountain instead of halfway up. And so, and this happens with every major piece of health legislation. We see the inflation rate double for a year or two before and maybe a year after it gets passed, out of the fear that we might be regulated, so we want to bump it up as much as we can before it goes down. So yes, the 2010 bump may be a response to the Affordable Care Act, but I can show you a bump like that from Medicaid legislation. I can show you the same bump from the passage of the Part D program back in 2006.
Thank you, Dr. Schondelmeyer. One quick question before I turn you over to Senator Kiffmeyer. In regards to the EpiPen and some of the other medicines you referred to, would the price in Canada or in some other international market, do you know what the prices were at that time? Even like with the Daraprim, when that went from $13 to $750 a tablet. I thought that I read that in India, it was 4 cents in US dollars that you could pay. Instead of $750 a pill, you could get it for 4 cents if you got it from India. Could you comment on that?
Yes, I don't recall the exact price, Senator Jensen, but your notion is correct. Actually, the $13.50 that jumped to $750, before it was $13.50, it was like 50 cents in the U.S., and then it jumped to $13.50, and we didn't remark at that, even though that was, what would that be, a 15-fold increase. So yes, it was. The cost of it is very low. The $750 had nothing to do with the cost of making it, nothing to do with anything in terms of the production side of it. It was simply, I'm the only one that makes this, if you want this drug, it has a unique use, there aren't many alternatives, here's what you're going to pay. And yes, most drugs cost, in other countries, cost a third to a half less than what they do in the U.S.
Thank you, Dr. Schondelmeyer. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Well, Mr. Chair, my main thing is that we have another 45 minutes of this hearing,
Yes.
and we have two more excellent presenters, so I appreciate this discussion, but I would suspect the next two presenters will also have good information. I just want to be sure we can get to that.
Thank you, Senator.
For us as members, maybe let's get through the data, because we can always have more of a discussion, but I would really like to see us get to the presenters if we could.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. I appreciate that reminder. Thank you. Dr. Schondelmeyer, why don't you go ahead and take a couple minutes and just, if you want to, just put sort of a summary package together for us and share that with us. And thank you for the handout, and thank you for presenting on short notice. And I would hope that you might be willing to return to us if we put out a request, because the breadth of your understanding of PBMs and the healthcare industry and the pharmaceuticals is impressive, and it's very helpful to us. So go ahead and summarize if you would, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jensen and Senator Kiffmeyer, thanks. And I will put forward that offer. I'd be glad to work with you and the committee and any deliberations and follow-up and discussing ideas or possibilities. I think, trying to think of the best way to summarize this, I'll jump to the end. Basically, there are several roles that a state can play in healthcare. And these are roles you can play in almost any marketplace. I'll get there in a second. Okay, a state can be a regulator. You can regulate various things. An example of that would be you regulate public goods and utilities, utility rate regulation, and you've got experience with that in various marketplaces. And you do that when you create a monopoly, you create a body to regulate it and make sure that that monopoly doesn't go awry. Perhaps we have that situation in healthcare and with pharmaceuticals. Second, there are times when the state acts as a wholesaler of various things. I'm not advocating this, but throwing out options you could consider. For example, in some states, they are the wholesaler for liquor, and they control liquor sales, liquor distribution, liquor licenses. The state could be a wholesaler for drugs and buy all the drugs that come in the state, and then negotiate statewide for the prices and then send them to the distributors in the state. The state could and should be a prudent purchaser of whatever it is the state's buying. And you have a Department of Administration that in general is a good prudent purchaser, but you realize most of the prescription drugs paid for in the state of Minnesota don't flow through state-controlled operations. Medicaid does. You have state employees, you have some state hospitals and facilities, and you have a pretty good multi-state prescription drug buying coalition, but the state does need to make sure that in every sector, that every player in the state market has an opportunity to be a prudent purchaser and has the information needed to be a prudent purchaser. Transparency of price information. You'll hear a lot of comments from other players in the market that will tell you, if you require me to disclose my prices, people won't get as good a deal. Well, I don't see all that many good deals out there in drug prices right now anyway, so I'm not sure what we're losing. But I don't think it's going to raise the prices the way most people allege it will. So be a prudent purchaser. The state is a subsidizer of health care. You put money in out of the state coffers for Medicaid, for various health programs, and you pay for health care for employees as well as for many citizens who can't afford it on their own. So the state becomes a subsidizer. And then the state could become an importer. Minnesota at various times has dealt with, well, let's allow and buy drugs in Canada and see if we can work with the FDA to bring drugs in for Canada. Most of the medications would cost, like I said, a third to a half of the price in Canada that they do in the U.S. Now, that sounds like a simple solution, but of course, things aren't always as simple as they seem. If we started buying our drugs from Canada, suddenly Canada would start to have shortages and say, well, we can't sell you any more drugs at that price. So there are some issues. But the state can play any or various types of these roles. I think one of the leading issues needs to be considered is we create lots of monopolies in lots of ways in the healthcare market, and particularly for pharmaceuticals. And I think the state federal and state governments have some responsibility to make sure that the marketplace then prices those products appropriately in that monopoly environment. And I would argue that we don't have that right now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schondelmeyer. Certainly appreciate your presenting, and we will be in touch. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to the Senate Select Committee for excellent questions. We are going to turn our attention to our next presenter, Dr. Charles Muscaplat. He's a McKnight Presidential Leadership Endowed Chair, and he'll be speaking to us. Thank you so much, sir, for coming, and if you would please introduce yourself, that would be wonderful. Dr. Muscaplat will be specifically addressing pharmaceutical development in regards to how new drug therapies get to market, which is clearly pertinent. Dr. Muscaplat, if you could.
And senators, I would like to first maybe just add a little bit of background information to my introduction, that I did spend 20 years in the pharmaceutical industry developing drugs in oncology, rheumatology, and cardiology. And I've been at the university for the past 17 years. I served on the scientific advisory board of a large West Coast venture capital firm that provided seed capital to startup drug companies. And I've been on the board of directors of numerous startup drug companies. So I have experience both on the academic and the private sector side. And maybe during the course of my remarks, I can address some of the comments and questions that you had of the prior speaker. And I would say that I loved that talk before me. That was most informative. So new drug therapies, how do they get to market? As I said, I spent 19 and a half years in the drug industry. At the university, I'm semi-retired. I have really only two functions at the moment. I serve on two committees to teach faculty how to commercialize their inventions: medical devices, drugs, software, and diagnostic tests. So I'm trying to foster commercial innovation among our faculty to see if we can make more products, make competition, deliver benefits to the academic, the public, the nation, and the world. And I do consult at this moment for two companies. I want you to know that before I speak. The landscape, how do drugs get developed? Well, it's an overlapping role between the federal government, National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, Defense Department, states, universities, philanthropy, private sector, and there's partners among all of them. If you look at the amount of money, the drug industry in the U.S. alone spends about $70 billion on drug development. NIH has about a $30 billion annual budget. It's hard to know how much the state universities spend because that's your money. It's grant money that comes from the federal government. It's philanthropy. And it's the buildings that you built that are staffed by faculty, that are funded by you, by tuition, by philanthropic endowed chairs, and by the federal government. But it all acts in a synergistic formula. The biotech industry is spending about $20 billion. And so all this is sort of how inventions get made. So there's a big role for the public sector in research and discovery of drugs and vaccines. And most of that is limited to the basic research component, the early stage of research, the basic science discovery, and not so much the development. The first drug that was a partnership between the academy and private industry was insulin. The prior speaker mentioned insulin was discovered at University of Toronto in 1921, and they tried to make it. They couldn't, so they turned to Eli Lilly, and had been really the major insulin supplier for up until the mid to late 1980s. You might think that most drugs are developed by large companies. Well, since about 1980, it's about equal between startup companies and big companies. So if you look at this graph, the blue line, the number of drugs developed by big companies, and the green line is the number of drugs developed by small companies, and that line has converged. And generally what happens is the small companies develop a drug to get it partway through clinical development, and then a big company buys them. That's been the model for the last 15 or 20 years. That happened to my company. I started in 1980, and it was bought by a big company in recent past. If you look at there was a historical, since World War II, that the more money companies spent on drug development, the bigger numbers of approvals they got. And that stopped about the year 2003 or 4. It's hard to tell when. It might have stopped sooner than that. The more money they spent, they got less approvals. So I got my last drug approval in 1996 when there was a record number of drug approvals of 53. We're running 19, 20, 21, 20 drugs approval, even though we're spending 3 or 4 or 5 times as much in real dollars as we were back in the heyday of pharmaceutical development, which was the 70s and 80s and 90s. So we call that difference between what you spend and what you get as the innovation gap. If we were to plot that new drug per output of dollar expended, you would see this curve. It's a terrible looking curve. The more money you spend, the less you get. Pretty soon it'll be a negative number. You've all seen this graph before. It's the Moore's law of computer chips, which has been running at this slope of that curve for the last 40 years. Chip speed doubles every 18 to 24 months. If you do the same curve for drug development, new drugs developed per $1 billion expended, it's a negative curve. So we're quickly going to the point where we're getting less productivity. And if I were to make a comment that one of the reasons why there's high drug prices is this curve. There's no productivity in the industry. The only way to make money is to raise prices. And I could go into that in great detail if you want later. There have been some life-saving discoveries that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But this is the reason you're paying more for drugs, is that the innovation is gone from the industry. When you go inside the wood-paneled meeting rooms of the large companies, and I've been there many times, that they're worried sick about where their next innovation is going to come from. Most of the large companies have merged, been bought and sold, so we're down to about 1/5 as many companies as there were in 1980, and they thought they could get efficiency by mergers and acquisitions. That has failed. Most innovation is coming from small companies, and now it's coming from the academy as the academicians have figured out that they too can be innovative and reach into the development cycle rather than just the basic discovery cycle. So my opinion is that the price rise is due to lack of productivity. And this is a very tough problem. First of all the easy drugs have been developed. And now we're facing diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer. But even in cancer, we've made remarkable progress. We've taken disease that were fatal in 6 months, and now people live for 7, 8, 9, 10 years as chronic cancer. I have arthritis. I take a drug that costs $30,000 a year. I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be employed if it was 40 years ago. I would be disabled and home. It's worth that for me. So both things are true. The remarkable nature of pharmaceuticals and their impact, nobody dies of ulcers anymore. Nobody dies of gout anymore. People live a lot longer for many types of cancers. But there also is a productivity challenge that is earth-shaking and it hasn't quite hit yet because they still make a lot of money. And I've developed drugs all over the world, and this is the only place where I've never had my price regulated. I got a pill approved in 1993 that sold for $1 a pill in the US, and I got 13 cents a pill in the Netherlands. This is the cost curve, the average price of drug development. This isn't the cost to the consumer, this is the cost to the developer. The cost to develop a drug has risen at a 13.3% compounded rate since 1950. And it doesn't take long to realize that that goes off the chart. That goes to infinity. And I know that you cannot have drugs cost infinity to develop, because at infinity there's no price the consumer can pay. If you look at the attrition rate about drug development, if you follow with me the panels left to right, that failure rate is going up in animal studies, phase 1, first in human, phase 2, early stage efficacy, phase 3, large scale efficacy, and registration. We're even having lots of drugs fail after they're registered and on the market. 70% of drugs that are launched do not have the success that was predicted by the company that developed it. Again, part of this overall productivity problem. Back in 1980, it took 7 years and $200 million to develop the average pharmaceutical. In 2010, it took 800 million or $1 billion and 15 years. Now, these numbers are funny numbers. It doesn't actually cost 200 million. I developed a drug for 28 million once in the mid-90s. But I worked on 5 drugs that each cost 28 million. Only one made it. The other 4 failed. So on average, it cost 200 million for me to develop a drug. That's where these numbers come from. There isn't a single drug that ever cost $1 billion. If you take the company's research budget, all the projects they start versus the ones that make it, do the simple arithmetic, that's how much it costs to develop a drug. So it's a little misleading, but it really is expensive. When I did cancer clinical trials, it's $50,000 a patient to do a cancer study. You need about 800 patients for a pancreatic cancer drug, probably more for tumors that are more prevalent. It generally takes about 5,000 to 10,000 chemicals tested in animals before you get one drug that reaches the marketplace. Why do they fail? Hard to know exactly. Most fail because they don't work. 30% fail because they turn up side effects that are not discovered early on. A serious allergic reaction that causes anaphylaxis, but that doesn't show up except 1 in 100,000 patients, can never be tested for during studies. Can never be tested for. It's too rare. It's in the market. You're testing it. You're treating people, tens of thousands or millions of patients. You see a fatal allergic reaction, the drug comes off the market. You cannot test for that during the study. So efficacy, safety, or these days, it's not as good as something that's already there, particularly an older drug. Efficacy is the single biggest reason why drugs fail. They get into the market. You test them in generally healthy people. When they're out in the market, they're tested in a wider variation of humans. 70% of drugs that are launched into the market do not have predicted rates of return. In the last 10 years, it's almost certainly because the insurance companies refuse to pay for it unless it's got a better rate of return than an old drug. Some examples, I forgot this slide. The industry is spending 3 times as much as a decade ago for half as many drugs approved. Phase 2 timelines, which is the first time you can see efficacy, is taking twice as long. Of all the drugs that have been developed since World War II, there's only about 1,320 drugs that have been approved. We produce no more drugs today than we did 50 years ago. And there's 4,300 companies that are sort of in the business along the chain, a value chain. And I did a calculation once that at that rate, every company will get an approval every 300 years. So they make money by raising prices because they've been unable to make money by innovation. The commercial risk now and regulatory risk now exceed the scientific risk. A lot more drugs are approved than make money. I know that there's drugs that are outrageously priced, some that cost $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, but there's a lot of drugs that don't make it that wind up not charging anything. And so we're paying for those in the formula of everything goes into the cost of development. And so the commercial risk is 70% of drugs that are approved, launched into the market, are deemed commercial failures. So of the 20 drugs that are approved every year, probably 10 of them, 15 of them are not commercially successful. So the ones that are, they raise the price to the absolute breaking limit. Drug companies are shifting away from discovery to what I call late stage or Me Too drugs. Drugs that have been approved for one use get approved for another. Phase 3 studies, which are late stage drug development, is now taking the most of the research and development of big companies. They're not investing in early stage because it's been too risky, and the innovation is going to have to come from small companies and academies. This slide shows you what happened pre-2008. If you're a physician, you prescribe Prilosec, and after 2010, you prescribe Nexium. They're no different. They're the same. Prilosec went off patent. Then the salespeople hounded you to prescribe Nexium. You got the same clinical benefit for the privilege of paying a lot more for another 18 years. Celexa or Lexapro are basically the same drug, and Neurontin for neuropathic pain is generic, and now we have Lyrica, which is a similar drug at 1/5 the dosage volume, but it's similar in efficacy, but it's has a longer patent life. But after 2008, we saw that Imitrex was followed by Trexamet, which was a commercial failure because the insurance company said, Imitrex is good enough. We're not going to pay for the new generation. Coreg for congestive heart failure or heart failure came out with a controlled release that fewer doses a day. The insurance company said, no way, Jose. We're good enough with the twice a day. Let the patient take it twice a day. We're not going to pay $25 a day so they can take it once a day versus twice a day. So there's some regulation going on here, same thing with Effexor and Pristique. So the definition of insanity is to take 16 years on average for a new drug and mostly fail, which is why I think you're seeing the price increases. All the reasons that the previous speaker said are all true. But I would just add one more layer on to Dr. Schondelmeyer's thought that it's productivity that's squeezed that's causing the companies to raise prices because it's the only tool they have to stay in business. This is the counterinsurgency diagram that General Stanley McChrystal developed for Afghanistan. And I would say that drug development looks a lot like that. So all the companies now are trying to play the money ball game. Can we develop a drug on the cheap? It is becoming very popular, and I coach and I advise a lot of small companies on how to do this. The other thing that happened in the last few years, we've seen $60 billion worth of pharmaceuticals come off patent, and not nearly enough new patented drugs come into the market. So if productivity was steady, that we had branded drugs that replaced the going off patent, they wouldn't have to raise prices. But since there aren't the replacements, the only tool you have is price increases, or the joke about if all you had a hammer, everything's a nail. So we have rising R&D costs. We're competing worldwide, wherever you are. Companies go shopping to every university and every small company in the world. There's too few new ideas, longer development times, shorter exclusivity because it takes longer. People are more concerned about safety. There's pricing pressure in spite of the fact that we're seeing ridiculous pricing. We have an aging population, which is a surrogate for consumption of health care. We have biological breakthroughs that are on the cusp, and we can improve on existing therapies. So it's a complicated sort of situation, and I would urge you to think about what you can do as a regulatory agency to maybe increase innovation and productivity. What can the academic institutions, which are under your control or somewhat under your control, if you cut faculty, you get fewer productive inventions, and we feed the chain that results in drugs and innovations and medical devices. This state has been a wonderful example of what medical device innovation can do. We've not been big in pharmaceuticals, but maybe we can change that with what we're doing at the university. I think that's my last slide, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senators.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muscaplat. I'm going to turn first to Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Dr. Muscaplat, thank you for that. You made a comment that I found very interesting because, as we all know, that competition is good. But your comment was basically the pharmaceutical companies are not getting into it because they're not making enough money. What is the definition of making enough money? I mean, that I think we probably need to define that, because the consumer is definitely paying the price on a lot of these innovations and medications. And so I'm just concerned about the how it usually fits into the economic model. It's not fitting there.
Yes, Mr. Chair and Senators. Making enough money is when the company's making enough money that the board doesn't fire the CEO or sell the company. It's a Wall Street definition of making enough money. So when companies have not made enough money, the boards have decided to sell the company or merge or buy. And that throws a huge productivity wrench into the productivity of the people that work at those companies. And the wave of mergers and acquisitions that happened over the last 20 years has not yielded any detectable productivity. Maybe has maybe has hindered it. But the definition of what's enough money is really the Wall Street definition. It's our pension funds, people who manage our pension funds and retirement accounts, who vote for the shareholders and boards of directors of the companies that are the innovators we're talking about. We don't make that definition. It's the people that we elect in our state pension funds, the university retirement accounts. They're the ones that vote for the boards of directors of the companies, and when they think they're not making enough money, they'll put pressure. There used to be a time when Lilly had a scientist physician as the CEO, and when the family, who were physicians, retired out of Lilly, they put business people in charge, and productivity died. So they're trying to put physician scientists back in charge of Lilly to see if they can regain productivity, as opposed to a Wall Street definition of productivity, which is earnings per share per quarter. They're trying to look at, patients' lives improved. Using a medical definition, what is the clinical benefit? A clinical benefit is not $1 a share. A clinical benefit is life improvement, years of life, disease-free survival, those things. So I think it's a Wall Street definition that we have very little control over.
Thank you, Dr. Muscat. Senator Rosen, follow-up?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Dr. Muscat, in your opinion, the reviews at the federal level and hearings such as this, has that made the pharmaceutical companies aware of their overreach? And is this something that we should take a look at, what Dr. Schondelmeyer said about a review board at the federal level, at the state level? What are some of the tools that we can use to perhaps get some accountability back into the pharmaceutical industry?
Dr. Muscat.
Mr. Chair and Senator Rosen, senators, I think that every country that I've gotten drug approvals in has had a price regulatory board. Most severe would be Japan, where you're not given an approval, you're not given a price which you can charge until the drug's approved in the market and they can see how it works. So you're priced on value provided. Most of these drugs cost very little to make. I mean, very little to make. I mean, the average gross profit margin is typically above 85%, which meaning that 85% of every dollar. When I was developing drugs, the liability insurance per pill cost more than the active ingredient. So you could start by asking our federal partners to see if they can get price competition for Medicare. I mean, that would be, just to set an example, that's the only place in the world that there's no competition. Our hospital, Dr. Schondelmeyer can tell you everyone negotiates except certain segments of the federal government. The FDA is prohibited by law from considering cost in its approval strategy. That's been, I think that's, maybe Dr. Schondelmeyer knows how long that's been, but I think for as long as I've been in the industry, FDA is not to take price into account when they consider whether or not a drug should be approved or not. It's a risk-benefit calculation. Does it provide a clinical benefit at an acceptable risk? And I've written many of these risk-benefit sections in new approvals, and that's the basis of approval. So there's no cost involved. So if it could be done in a non-political, fair way, might have a benefit. It would be the only country in the world that doesn't do it.
Thank you, Dr. Muscat. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Dr. Muscat, one of your slides here talks about landscape shifting. And one of the last lines is non-U.S., most innovation from the U.S. So I wanted to be sure that I was understanding that most of the innovation is on U.S., that it's done in the U.S. And my question is, it seems as though some of these drugs that are innovated in the U.S., but are sold in other countries at a much lower price. And so why is it that other countries could pay less for the same drug and we pay more here in the U.S.? And how does that connect to the innovation? So it's a little bit of a convoluted question, but it's because I think you know more than I do. So I'm just going to toss it to you and see what you could comment on in that
Thank you,
context.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer. The landscape is shifting. We are seeing innovation coming from other parts of the world, China, for example, some Eastern Europe scientists. There's nobody who has any monopoly on intelligence. It's the motivation to enter the capitalistic system that is spurring innovation in some parts of the world. Most innovation occurs in the United States. The highest prices are in the United States, so they can hire the most people here. And it's easier to raise capital in the United States. So I think I started a company in the Netherlands. It was very hard to find a building to raise venture capital. The real venture capital markets are here, which I think is what drives the innovation, particularly the startup. The sector that makes 50% of the drugs is the small companies, and they're driven by capital and access to capital, venture capital, angel investments, Wall Street. And so I think that's the biggest reason. And there's a tradition for that here. There's not a tradition for academic scientists to go into industry, at least into the life science industry, as much in the rest of the world, but that could be changing too.
Thank you, Dr. Muskelblatt.
Just one quick thing.
Follow.
They sell those same drugs for less outside the U.S. Is there truly, what is the cost then? Why are they able to sell them for less outside the U.S. and they sell them to us for more? Is that true, and is there a relationship? Is that an accurate portrayal of the same drug?
Dr. Muskelblatt.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, I do believe that it's the same drug. That when I developed drugs in Japan or in Europe, we got an approval for the efficacy, the risk-benefit, that we could sell a drug. It provided a meaningful clinical benefit with an acceptable risk for the indication. And then we had to go in front of a pricing commission to negotiate price. And you could have a few appeals, but you generally had to sell at the price that, at least in Europe, it was many members of the European Union got together and they set prices. So it's the same drug.
Thank you, Dr. Muskelblatt.
Thank you.
Senator Pratt.
I have a couple of questions, and the first one is really driven by this slide that says the definition of insanity is to take 16 years, spend billions, and mostly fail. And you've talked a lot about productivity. How much if you think about the idea that we're producing fewer new molecules, that the easy drugs have been developed and these harder ones take more time to develop, it seems to make sense that the cost of the drug goes up. But you've talked a lot about productivity. Give me a sense of what you're thinking of productivity, and then also could you talk about the regulatory environment? Because I know a lot of regulated industries are seeing increased regulatory oversight that's adding cost to the process as well.
Dr. Muskelblatt.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt, I'll maybe break that into pieces. I'm not against the FDA. I've found them to be easy to work with. And these days, every drug that gets a priority review, meaning it treats an important disease with an unmet need, is getting approved in 6 months or less. There are no overdue priority review drugs in the United States at the moment. We now meet or beat every company in the world for approvals, and I found FDA easy to work with, in my opinion. I haven't done as many drugs as other people. I found them rational and reasonable for drugs that treat important diseases, particularly life-threatening diseases like cancer. For diseases or drugs that are what I call Me Too drugs, they can take their time, and they can be lengthy. I had a drug approved in 1996 that took FDA 2.5 years to approve. So both things are true. They can be very good for important drugs. But the other part of your question was, there's only 2 drugs that have been approved for pancreas cancer, and there have been, if you look in clinicaltrial.gov, there's 200 clinical trials for pancreas cancer right now, and everything fails. And so if you look at all the models for malignant melanoma, which now the standard therapy is immunotherapy, maybe the last 20 drugs, one has worked and 20 have failed. So we don't know how to do it yet for some of these things. We don't know how to treat Alzheimer's. Everyone tried to treat plaque, if you heard that term, and it turns out plaque is not the goal anymore. But everybody was barking up the wrong tree, if you will, for the last 15 or 20 years. They finally had drugs that really got rid of plaque, and patients didn't get any better. It's like the old joke when I develop cancer drugs, you're not treating x-rays. You can shrink a tumor, but patients still die because the small tumor got in the wrong spot. So it's hard. There are a lot of things that are very, very hard.
Thank you, Dr. Muscatlat. Follow-up, Senator Pratt.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the previous question about international drug sales. When the companies are selling these drugs overseas at discounted prices, are they making money in the drugs, or are we subsidizing that lower cost here in the U.S.?
Dr. Muscatlat.
Mr. Chair, Senator Pratt. I'm not an economist, but the companies make most of the money in the United States. And they put 15 or 20% of their sales back in the R&D. Most of that's in this country, although you're seeing it dispersed a little bit, but most of it's still here. So I would say if they're selling 10 billion pills and we're charging $5 a pill and they're charging 15 cents a pill, probably can do that calculation pretty easy.
Thank you, Dr. Muscatlat. Senator Pratt? Okay. Senator Friends.
This room are trying to determine is if it costs $9 in Canada, how it costs $170 in Minnesota. And Dr. Muscatlat, just so we all understand you, the answer I'm hearing is the pricing rules are different overseas, and the United States and Minnesota have a looser set of rules for what prices can be set. Are we in the ballpark with that?
Dr. Muscatlat.
Mr. Chair, Senator Friends, I think that's right. There's no regulation regarding pricing that I'm aware of, other than what the insurance companies will pay for it. I do, if I could maybe just add a comment. I mean, I would say that we have to think about which drugs are providing benefits. I mean, we always hear the story about the drug that was selling for $5 suddenly is selling for $500, as opposed to the drug that was treating a disease that was universally fatal is now people live for 10 years, is charging $100,000. I think they're different. So just so we keep that in mind, so both things are happening at once.
Thank you, Dr. Muscatlat. Senator Wickland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. If we're looking at things that we can do from a state perspective, if investing in trying to drive more innovation and productivity is something that maybe we can do, we do it through funding to our higher education institutions. Do you consider that also a possibility through industries, and in both cases through, I guess, academia and industry? How do we as a state, is there any way for us to tell what the value is of, addressing it through means like that? And I guess we have different policy levers we can use, but is that what you were getting at? And I guess, is there a way for us to tell kind of what our return or what the return is or on those investments?
Dr. Muscatlat.
Mr. Chair, Senator Wickland, that's a very difficult question. I have this large NIH grant. It's an experimental grant to see if we can foster innovation and commercialization. And we're trying to come up with metrics for how we judge success of our program. Do we have more patents filed? Do we have more startup companies? Do we have companies that start and raise money? Do we create jobs? I think it's going to be hard to tell for a very long time. Most innovation is sort of flowing across the world now. Most big companies are not doing their own research anymore. They're buying it from universities or small companies. So it's a little bit like it's a world stage now. So Minnesota has been quite creative. We have the third largest public university in a state that's 20th in population. and we rank very high in many sciences, physicians, medicine. But what can we afford as a state with 20th in population? So they're very complicated metrics. But if you're not going to invest in it, then you're not going to play. So both are true.
Thank you, Dr. Muscatlat. Follow-up, Senator Wickler? Senator Kiffmeyer.
I just wanted to follow up on the train of thought that we had just a little bit ago, and that was on the same drugs selling for less overseas or Canada or so on than they are here. But my one thought in looking at this domino effect, since we do pay more of that, we also contribute more to research and development. And so we got to realize that while we've been celebrating all the new drugs and the new life-saving things like that, the expenses for getting to those things, you've addressed some of that, the innovation from small companies, things like that. But that would be my one concern, what happens to research and development if we did some price controls here in Minnesota or in the U.S. in general, what happens to research and development for those new life-saving or life-extending drugs?
Dr. Muscatlat.
Mr. Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer. Well, that's what, when I worked in the drug industry, that's what I said, that if you regulate prices in the United States where most of the innovation happens, where all the money spent on innovation, then innovation will dry up. And I think that's been the industry's position. And it's hard to argue with it that, I mean, at some point, if you regulated it modestly, maybe not much will happen, but if you priced like other countries price, there wouldn't be $70, $80, $90 billion a year ready to invest in new developments, new pharmaceuticals, new medical devices. And I think the advantages are, the accretion of the benefit occurs to the patients. It occurs for jobs, good paying jobs. It occurs to our pension funds and all invested in these drug companies. So it's a little bit like you can imagine in inverse compounding. If you start taking money away, you'll get less innovation, you'll have less good jobs, you'll have less returns on Wall Street, your pension funds will do less well. But I certainly have not been able to think of a solution, nor the people I hang out with have not got a solution yet either.
Thank you, Dr. Muscatlat. I have a final question for you. I'm going to be unfair to you and ask you to comment on one of Dr. Schondelmeyer's slides. He said, if you spend 200% more on a drug, does a person's diabetes get 200% better? I have many patients that have stopped their insulin if they're using Lantus or something like that because it's just too expensive, and they come into my office and their A1Cs are off the wall, and I say, gee, something's changed. Well, doc, I needed to stop the Lantus. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I haven't been a very forceful or aggressive about pulling out the old-fashioned one called NPH and using that, and my understanding is that that's pennies compared to the Lantus. If I were to do that as a practicing physician, what kind of a decrease in the quality of that diabetic's care do you think would take place? I'm trying to sort of, I guess, paint a little picture here for the public to understand, too, that oftentimes we get pushed and cajoled and sold into a product that may be a little glitzier, but it probably is nowhere near 200% glitzier. And I guess I'm looking for your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, it's a good question. I have arthritis, and my rheumatologist prescribes indomethacin for ankylosing spondylitis, just like they did in 1968 when it's approved. It's the best starter drug for that disease, and it's been generic since 1980 something. So I think it's just, since I do clinical trials, I have to figure out what's clinically relevant as an endpoint. So I would say, can you get a clinically relevant endpoint for that product? And I don't know how else to answer it. I mean, some of the new products are easier. Some of them have less of the rare side effects. You make antibodies to some of the old insulins or things. They didn't have good a circulating half-life and things. But done correctly, they can achieve a similar clinical benefit.
Thank you, Dr. Muscaplat. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm certainly will be in touch, and thank you again. Thank you again, panel, for your excellent questions. Or I should say Senate Select Committee. We're going to turn to Ms. Young-Fried, Vice President of Pharmacy Plan Services for Health Partners. She'll be our next presenter. Thank you very much, ma'am. Would you please introduce yourself and proceed?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Senators. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I really appreciate your leadership in tackling this very tough issue. My name is Young-Fried, and as you said, I'm the Vice President of Pharmacy Plan Services with Health Partners. Previously, I worked at Unite Here Health and Hospitality RX, headquartered in Illinois, as their Chief Pharmacy Officer. I have a doctorate from the University of Illinois, a Master of Science in Applied Pharmacoeconomics from the University of Florida, and it's my pleasure to be here. I am a pharmacist, so I'm not a public policy person. My views are as a pharmacist, a managed care pharmacist, and I want to share with you what I see around high-cost drugs, and also share with you what Health Partners is doing to address it. So let me start off with this slide. This is Health Partners Commercial 2016 data. And what this shows is how much we've spent on different segments of healthcare. As you can see, in 2016, pharmacy costs now represents 20% of total healthcare spend for us at Health Partners. Okay. If you notice inpatient costs, that's 19%. So for the first time ever, pharmacy costs has outpaced hospital costs for us. I didn't think I would see this, and I'm sure it's going to get worse in the future, unfortunately. So let's look at why drug costs is so high from our perspective. And we look at our pharmacy claims data for this. We know there are some key drivers of drug costs, and these are the three that I look at when I look at pharmacy claims and rising costs. Utilization, drug mix, unit costs. Utilization is basically, are there more use for a medication, such as we have a lot more diabetics in the US, and so of course utilization for diabetes drugs is going to go up, and it has. Drug mix is whether a low-cost generic is used versus a more costly brand drug. And it could be a specialty brand, traditional brand, or a biosimilar, which is a generic for specialty drugs. Unit price just means has the cost of the pill, the syringe, the tube, has that gone up, and has it gone up significantly? So any change in one of these three drivers will change costs for us. Utilization certainly has gone up. So this data from 2016, what we've seen is compared to 2015, there's been over a 3% increase in dispensed medication. So physicians writing more for patients. And in particular, this increase is been quite high. It hasn't been this high since 2012. And that increase, at that time, that increased because of the delayed increase after the recession. And now we're seeing another increase recently. So this slide shows particular drug categories where we see significant increases in utilization. High blood pressure, hypertension being the predominant, followed by mental health conditions. Okay. So utilization certainly has increased, and that has been a factor. The other key driver, as I mentioned, is the drug mix. So are they using more costly medication or generic drugs which are cheaper? The next 3 slides that I'll go over address drug mix. For health partners, we have around 8 million prescriptions that are paid annually. Okay? Of the 8 million claims, 90% of those dispensed are generic. Okay? So the predominant drugs are generic, which is good. And then we have 9% for traditional brands and less than 1% for specialty. But if you look at the percent of cost for these drug types, it's really different, very significant. Generic drugs, again, 90% of the claims, they only account for 26% of our total costs. Okay? That's an average cost of $20 for us. For traditional brand drugs, 9% of all dispensed drugs, they have an average cost of $290. Total spend, 37%. And that 1% specialty, that's an average cost of $5,000. It's very consistent with what you've seen earlier. And that is around 36% of our total pharmacy spend, less than 1%. And this is rising, and it will reach quickly 50% of our total pharmacy spend. And I've seen it with some of our smaller groups as well, unfortunately. So this is why for us at Health Partners, it's important to consider a low-cost, net-cost strategy by promoting generic drugs and also lower-cost brand drugs. Okay. So drug mix is very important. This is another slide that shows the difference between a brand and generic prescription. Generic prescription for the past 7 years has been pretty flat. It's around $19, $20 per prescription. If you look at the brand drugs, it's not the same. So in 2009, this was around $160. In 2016, it's over $500 per claim. This is a 200% increase in a 7-year time period. Okay. 7's supposed to be a lucky number, but this is not it for us. Another way to show this is if you break out the brands and look at traditional brands versus specialty brands. So for traditional brands, we see that there's been definitely an increase in trend, but specialty drugs, the top blue line there, is more than double the trend for our traditional brand drugs. This is unsustainable. Okay. So we talked about utilization, we talked about drug mix. And I want to also address the third cost driver, which is unit price increase. This slide shows you some of the top drugs that are prescribed, top costing drugs that are prescribed. And in 2016, what you're seeing is it's close to 10% trend for these drugs alone. Okay? That's 7.6 times 2016 Consumer Price Index. I don't actually know why these drugs are increasing costs, like some of my presenters, previous presenters have said here. For example, Copaxone and Rebif are for multiple sclerosis. These drugs came out in 1990s, and around that time, they were about $10,000 a year. Fast forward to the present, they're around $60,000 a year. It's the same drug. There's really no improvement on these medications, and yet they're so much more expensive. So as it relates to these 3 cost drivers, utilization, drug mix, and unit price, there's a few things that could moderate the influence of higher drug costs. And one of them is the need for price transparency. So we've heard from previous presenters that pharmaceutical companies spend quite a bit of money to bring their drugs to market. And that's quite true, probably quite true. I've seen different estimates of how much it takes for drugs to come to the market. In the early 2000s, they were estimating close to $1 billion. I saw a recent article this year where Tufts was saying that it's closer to $3 billion to bring these drugs to market. Regardless of how much it takes to bring to market, once it's on the market, the price needs to be reasonable. Let me give you an example of this. Lipitor, when it was still brand, in the mid-2000s, they generated revenues of around $1 billion a month. $1 billion a month. And this drug was on for several years, as you know, it had patent. So they recouped their losses, I believe, quite quickly. And yet, why did they sustain their high costs for, the remaining patent life? It just doesn't make sense. And I don't think that's fair, especially since we as a nation, as a state, we contribute to some of these drugs coming to the market. The consumer should have a fair price as well. Just as the other speakers presented, I also advocate that there should be some sort of a review, not only for efficacy and safety by the FDA, but also for the value of the drug as it comes to the market. There has to be some evaluation, and right now there isn't. There is a need for it. And this would help with some of the egregiously priced drugs that are coming to the market. And I put an example, those two, Vimovo and Duexis. Vimovo is for pain and inflammation. It's a combination of 2 ingredients, and they're both over the counter, by the way. It's Aleve and it's Nexium combined. And right now, it's priced at $2,300 a month. You could get these 2 combinations, Aleve and Nexium, separately for around $20 over the counter. So I don't understand why it's priced this way. The same thing goes for Duexis. Duexis is a combination of 2 medications, Advil and Pepcid, both over the counter. And Duexis is the same. It's $2,300 a month. You could get both combination over-the-counter drugs, I don't know, for around $10. With a coupon, it might be less. So I don't understand why it's priced this way either. Utilization and drug mix is also, it also depends on certain business practices. And one of the business practices that I've seen from manufacturers is less competition through patent games or patent extensions. And an example is Paxil. So Paxil is an antidepressant. And there was just before it lost its patent, a generic manufacturer wanted to bring this to the market. The manufacturer for Paxil, GSK, sued, of course. And then that lawsuit allowed them to retain their patent for 3 additional years. So extended their patent. They knew they were still going to have problems with that even after that 3-year extension. So they sought another extension by coming out with a once-a-day pill instead of twice a day. And then they further came out with another extension by adding additional indication for eating disorder and premenopausal symptoms. So the generic manufacturer wasn't actually able to come out with their generic version of Paxil for an additional 5 years because of that. So if we could, if the government, if we could change some of the patent practices that allows less competition, I think this would help some of our issues with high-cost drugs. Another is biosimilars. Biosimilars are the generic versions for specialty brand drugs. And right now, it goes through a different pathway for approval by the FDA. Also, the regulations are still being worked out. The naming convention is still being worked on. It's quite difficult for providers to understand what is a biosimilar of which specialty brand drugs, because the name of the generic for the specialty drug is different from the brand specialty drug. So it's really a bit confusing.
Mr. Chair? Could I just interrupt for a second? For those of us not in the medical profession, could you help me understand what a biosimilar is?
Biosimilar is, we talked about specialty brand drugs. Biosimilar is the generic version of specialty brands. You can't call it generic.
Thank you, Dr. Freed. Dr. Freed, perhaps to further explore Senator Pratt's question, could you give us an example of 3 specialty drugs that have a biosimilar, and just maybe for whatever disease state, whether you're talking rheumatologic or whatever?
Well, biosimilars are just coming to the market. So it's sometimes considered a specialty med, but Lantus, as you know, it's not a biosimilar, but there's a drug similar to it that came to the market. It's called Basaglar. And you remember I said there's a nomenclature issue? Basaglar is considered a follow-on insulin or follow-on biologic. It's not a biosimilar. So it's not interchangeable with Lantus. So it's quite confusing.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. If I could just add, generics generally are considered to be interchangeable with the trade name drug. But with biosimilars and specialty drugs, or biosimilars and biologics, they're not identical. Oftentimes there's a protein change or an amino acid change or something like that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
And also the cell line that's used to create the biological drug might be different. So it's not just the active ingredient that's different, it's the way it's manufactured.
Thank you, Dr. Freed. But it is safe to say, isn't it, that a biosimilar can have the same impact to a biologic as a generic can have to a trade?
Exactly,
I think
yes.
that's what Senator Pratt wanted to know.
Yes, that's it.
Please proceed. Thank you, Dr. Freed.
Okay. The other way to stifle competition is when brand manufacturers and generic manufacturers agree to hold off the generic for a few months or a year. That stifles competition, and it's not good for our managing costs. The last business practice I'll discuss is direct-to-consumer advertising. So direct-to-consumer advertising, that only happens in the US and New Zealand. Nowhere else in the world is this allowed. And it does contribute to increase in utilization. And here's a slide that looks at Humira. Humira is the #1 drug by cost. It's definitely our #1 drug by cost. And in 2015, as you can see, they spent around $350 million in drug ads alone. January of 2017, just on commercials, they spent $35 million. So this kind of commercial promotion to consumers. They go to their doctor and they want this drug. They don't realize that there are generic standard treatments out there for some of these conditions. They want to bypass it all and go right to the specialty brand, which increases everyone's costs. So I would advocate our position of trying to eliminate direct-to-consumer advertising. So having said all that, what drives high-cost drugs, there are some things that Health Partners is doing to address some of these high costs. And I want to talk about, in particular, the first two, formulary management and prior authorization. These are the fundamentals of managing drug costs for a health plan. Without these programs in place, formulary management, prior authorization, we wouldn't be able to manage drug costs effectively. Our formulary decisions is based on our clinical committee of physicians and pharmacists. We, through our management, maximize generic utilization, and we try to make sure that we don't prefer brand drugs. We don't prefer brand drugs because they have high rebates. That's not what we do. We have a low net cost strategy. We want to make sure that generics are utilized to the fullest. And this slide kind of shows our results. Health Partners, we have a 91% generic performance. It is quite high, higher than our competitors. They're around mid-80s. And this is a savings of over $300 million. The other fundamental managed care program that we have in place is prior authorization. And of the 8 million claims that go through annually, less than 1% of claims are PA'd, are prior auth. Okay. And I know prior authorization isn't something that a lot of folks like, members, some of our physicians, our providers, but at Health Partners, we're really trying to make this better through electronic prior authorization. I think some of you are very familiar with us. And so what we do at Health Partners is, because we have visibility as a insurance company, as a PBM, and also we have a care delivery, we have doctors working in our clinics, we're able to see what's happening with electronic prior authorization that a lot of our other insurance and PBMs don't have perspective. We could see, as we're looking into this, that there's problems with the claims intermediaries in between the plan and the doctor seeing it in their electronic medical record. And we're trying to resolve some of those issues, because if our doctors cannot see what the formulary alternative is so that they don't have to write a PA, or if they can't get feedback right away saying that this drug is PA, then it's having an EPA is useless. It has to work well. So because Health Partners has visibility, we are trying to address this issue and improve service to our members and to our providers.
Dr. Fried, if I could give you just a 30-second break and be so bold as to just comment to the committee. EPA is an electronic prior authorization, is what she's referring to. And essentially what happens is perhaps Lipitor has gone generic, and so I'm going to, and I've been pushed by a drug company representative to go with Crestor, because that's the new kid on the block that's really the only one getting marketed, because the other statins are all generic. So I will then perhaps have Crestor on my mind, and in the afternoon I will treat Mr. Jones with Crestor, send it through, find out that Health Partners is saying, no, you need a prior auth for that. And what they're basically asking for is, what's your rationale for using a drug that's 20 times as expensive as the Lipitor that's now generic? In that situation, I would have to come up with a rationale, and most of the time I would not be able to, and so I would prescribe Lipitor. But I might not know that Lipitor is generic. So what I need to know from Health Partners when they send it through, or Park Nicollet, is that I have a couple choices. And what drives doctors crazy is when we're not given choices. So we guess again, and we get a prior auth request on that as well. So if when we get the refusal, if we were just given these 2 or 3 statin drugs would be acceptable alternatives, I think you'd see a lot of heat lost on the part of the physicians, because I know physicians give all the insurance companies a hard time. But the fact of the matter is, as a practicing physician, if I were in your shoes, I would absolutely want the tool of prior authorization to be able to control costs, because without it, it's like we're asking you to control costs, but we're going to tie both your hands behind your back.
Exactly, Mr. Chairman.
I apologize for the intrusion. Please proceed, Dr. Fried.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly my point, and I'm so glad you agree with our position on that as well. So formulary management, prior authorization, we do work on this quite a bit. We monitor constantly to make sure that drugs that have an increase in price, we do try to have steps in place to make sure we mitigate that increase as much as possible within our limits. There are some parameters, as the previous speakers have mentioned. The other programs that we have in place, specialty management, because specialty drug cost is so high, we have a lot of focus on this. So I won't go into all the programs, but we do have preferred pharmacy arrangement, site of care optimization program, reducing waste of these very expensive medication, and more around this area. Medication therapy management is an exceptional program within Health Partners. I came from Illinois less than a year ago, and they had medication therapy management, MTM, which is pharmacist counseling as well, but it's in its infancy compared to what I'm seeing here in Minnesota. It's absolutely fantastic. And our pharmacy counseling program, we've won an award through a Pinnacle Award for just this. So this program, by effectively managing overall treatment, monitoring for safety, efficacy with our doctors, we're able to save our patients total cost of care, $4,500 per patient. Another program that we have is partnering with our retail pharmacies. We want to make sure that they're also included in working with our doctors within the community to improve quality of care. And so we have an incentive program to work with our retail pharmacists to do just that, to save our patients money and to monitor for better quality. The last program that I'll mention is our drug cost transparency tool or platform. This is something we're just rolling out. And what's interesting about this is that when a patient goes in or a member goes in to this platform, they're going to see how much they've spent, of course, but they're also going to see missed opportunities where they could have had a generic alternative or a lower cost brand alternative, and also see which pharmacy would have been the least cost for them, so that their out-of-pocket is less. And this is especially important for patients who have high deductible health plan, or on a high deductible health plan, because they pay for the full cost of their medication. So they'll want to know where it's cheaper versus not. Okay. Here's another view which shows which pharmacy is cheaper for the patient, and this is at their location. So the last slide I'll end with is, having said all that, our advocacy position, very similar to what you've heard previously. The first two are something I feel the state could also act on, and we hope that you would partner with us on these advocacy positions. Transparency for costs and profit, eliminating direct-to-consumer marketing, at least here in the state, and then federally, nationally, unshackling the power of Medicare. It would be great if they negotiated drug prices and drug company loopholes abuses, especially around patents, and then make cost a factor in FDA approval. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, senators, for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fried, and I appreciate very much your summary slide. That's very helpful. Questions? Senator Frentz.
Very much, Mr. Chair. I did have a question about the prior authorization. I think most people would say the more information at the point of purchase, the better. Are there barriers to greater implementation of prior authorization? Is there a customer service feature? Is there some reason all organizations wouldn't move towards greater use of prior authorization to help keep the cost down for the patient? I see a smile. Look forward to the answer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Frentz, and please proceed, Dr. Fried.
Mr. Chair, Senator Frentz, electronic prior authorization is in its infancy. Minnesota, as far as I know, is the only state that mandated this. Other states do not. And the connectivity that allows electronic prior authorization is not there. It's not as smooth. So we have a lot of data intermediaries in between the insurance company and what the doctor sees within the EMR. We have SureScript, CenterX. We have all these organizations, and what they do in between, it's not coordinated. And so what you see sometimes within the electronic medical record seems a little gibberish. So we need to, as an industry, really work together to make sure that the data that's transmitted from the insurance company, from the PBM, to the provider is clear. And so that's what we're trying to do at Health Partners. But again, it's in its infancy, and we're only one health plan.
Thank you, Dr. Fried. If I could, Senator Frentz, perhaps you've gone down to the pharmacy to pick up the Levaquin that you were given for pneumonia, and while you were down there, you were found, the pharmacy says, well, you have to pay $800 for this. And you say, well, I can't pay $800, it should be only $20. Well, we have to do a prior auth then. So then the prior auth will go through, and then if we don't get a choice on the prior auth, you may stand there for 20 minutes, and as a busy senator, I'm sure that you wouldn't like that. So that's where the pushback comes, and the physician isn't happy about it, nor are you. Senator Klein, I think, has a comment, though. Thank you, Senator Frentz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Senator Klein.
Mr. Chair, Senator Frentz. So I actually will join you in bravely as a physician supporting the necessary role of prior authorization in controlling pharmaceutical costs. Having said that, the significant concerns from physician groups are, and nursing advocates and so forth, are that, for example, a patient will be on a medication that is well controlling their schizophrenia, and then all of a sudden their pharmacy benefit management program will change, and they'll say, no, before you take Risperdal, you have to go back to trying Haldol. You have to try something before you get to this. There's a change in medication. They feel it's clinically dangerous and unsettling to the patient. And there's several examples like that where physicians are trying to prescribe what they think is right for the patient, and the prior authorization impedes their work or destabilizes their work. But having said that, I think it plays a role. We just need to work towards solutions that you're proposing, like electronic and rapid results.
Thank you, Senator Klein. Dr. Fried, I think we intruded on your opportunity to refer or respond to Senator Frentz. Did you have anything else you wanted to say to Senator Frentz?
No, except that we are looking forward to making this work as efficiently as possible as well.
Follow up, Senator Frentz? Okay. Other questions? Senator Wickland.
One thing you didn't talk as much about, but I wondered if it does have a connection. Last time we heard about how so much of our healthcare spending is going towards patients with chronic diseases. Is there work that you do within Health Partners to help the whole entity understand the cost drivers you're seeing, the increases you're seeing in prescriptions that are going to support people with chronic diseases, to try and see if there's ways we can either reduce those costs or work towards prevention of the diseases to start with? But it seems like somehow we need to be getting at those chronic disease drug costs, the spending that we're doing on that, as well as some of these other areas. I don't know, would you be able to talk about that?
Thank you, Senator Freed. Dr. Freed.
Mr. Chair, Senator Wickland, thank you for that question. So within Health Partners, our strategy is around total cost of care management. So we don't look at healthcare in silos. So pharmacy is not siloed. A medical management benefit is not siloed. We try to integrate it so that when patients who have, members who have chronic disease, we look at the whole picture, their medical costs versus their pharmacy costs. Sometimes programs for chronic disease will increase pharmacy costs because they need to be stabilized on their medication, but it will decrease their overall medical costs, so decrease overall healthcare costs. So that's the kind of program that Health Partner focuses on. And we do have chronic disease program that manages diabetes, asthma, and other chronic conditions. And this might seem different from the approach that a lot of other insurance companies have that have carved out pharmacy, where things are not integrated, so you can't see the whole picture and manage it together. And I think managing it together is absolutely important, because a patient, you can't manage just half of the patient or half their treatment. It has to be holistic.
Thank you, Dr. Freed. Senator Wickland.
So would you also see there be a benefit in terms of this transparency for drug costs and profits, if we could see some prioritization about which drugs and treatments, we're trying to look for this greater transparency and the profit sharing part? I mean, getting experience from you in terms of what the bigger cost drivers are for Health Partners patients, I guess, would that be something that you could provide feedback to us on where to look for this greater transparency?
Please proceed, Dr. Freed.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, we would absolutely love to work with the committee on providing more information on which conditions to look at, and also around which areas for greater drug costs and transparency. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Freed. Thank you, Senator Wickland. Other questions? Seeing none, I would just like to say thank you again, Dr. Freed, for your very informative presentation, and also thank you to Health Partners in Park Nicollet for leading the way on some of this transparency thing. I was with Dr. Jeremy Springer this morning, and he showed me the rollout that you're doing on price transparency for physician charges, and it's similar to what you're doing with pharmacy transparency, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
This brings us to a close in regards to our presentations today, but I did want to provide opportunity for closing remarks by members. If anybody has any thoughts, I did want to share some of the other topics that we'll be considering in the next few months. We'll be dealing today with pharmaceuticals, and we probably will be bringing pharmaceuticals back for another agenda item. But we will be talking about price transparency, fee schedules, HSAs, low-value services and imaging costs, tiering and telemedicine, technology and possibly tort reform in terms of how it impacts on that cost curve, end-of-life services, electronic health benefits, electronic health record shortcomings and what the costs might be for that, and then reviewing the impact of Minnesota community measurements, mental health needs, as well as morphine-like drugs. And when I say morphine-like drugs, the reason I don't use the word opiate is because we don't want to lose sight of drugs that are not necessarily classified as opiates, such as a drug like tramadol, but it is a morphine-like drug, and if we don't address that as well, we might be missing something that might be contributing to the opiate crisis, if you will. So having shared those, I think if you have any thoughts or questions, please feel free to reach out to Andrea so that she can help formulate our future agendas. I think a big kudos to Andrea for investigating and finding outstanding presenters so that we can get a chance to really go deep into the weeds. Along the way, I'd like to think that we're not just accumulating lots of information in our head and lots of questions. I'd like to see us on a parallel track try to put together specific ideas that might provide the ingredients or recommendations for policy changes to the Health and Human Services committees and the other committees that might be coming into play once we meet again in February. So that's the goal, if you would. Any questions or comments? Senator Wickland.
Thank you. Thanks, Senator Jensen, for sharing the list of topics. I guess I would just, a couple things. If there's any way that we can see upcoming meeting topics, maybe further in advance, what's going to be on the next agenda as a high-level topic, so that kind of help us frame maybe some questions or ideas that we have. And then I hope that Dr. Schondelmeyer's presentation, where he got to the slide about state strategies, I hope we can kind of return to some of those for more discussion and to be able to ask experts like him or others about some of those strategies. But otherwise, I think that the list of topics, it seems great. I just would like to know a little bit further in advance.
Thank you, Dr. Senator Wickland. And I'm seeming to have trouble with Senator and Doctor Day. It must be schizophrenic of some sort. But regardless, I think in terms of ideas for testifiers, too, I think Andrew would appreciate input. So if you do look over that list that I just commented on, and if you have ideas, please reach out to Andrea on those, because I think we'll have Andrea email it to you, the questions. That would be excellent as well. Perhaps we could turn to Andrea right now, and you could comment on the meetings to come in terms of just review of time, because we've plugged in some meeting dates for September and October, but we sort of stopped halfway through November because we wanted to be sensitive to people's schedule for November, December, the holidays per se. Andrea, could you make a couple of comments, please?
Yeah, our next meeting is going to be September 7th, which is a Thursday, and that's going to be at 8 a.m. in room 1200, the room that we're sitting in. And the topic there is going to be the first of a two-part theme of the price tag of healthcare. The second part of that theme will be on Thursday, September 14th at 1 p.m., again in MSB 1200, the room that you're sitting in. And then we are going to be developing the agenda further into the fall, but the dates we have are October 12th at 1 p.m., October 26th at 1 p.m., and November 9th at 1 p.m. And all of those will be in this room, MSB 1200.
Any thoughts or questions or comments regarding the logistics of those meeting dates? Is that acceptable? Do people prefer 1 p.m. or would you like to have a mix of 8 a.m. and 1 p.m.s? Any thoughts? No thoughts? Okay. Senator Dran. Okay, so the first Thursday of the month would be better avoided?
In the morning.
In the
afternoon
morning.
I could do.
1 o'clock. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Dran. Any other questions, comments? Any questions or comments for today? Seeing none? Senator Klein.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So I just wanted to summarize what I think a lot of the speakers agreed on when you speak towards moving us towards actual solutions from the problems that we heard about today. There was support from all three speakers on some sort of oversight or regulatory pharmaceutical cost board at a state level. And certainly I think that would apply uniquely to this market of pharmaceuticals, since we do have a societal obligation to make sure certain pharmaceuticals are available, insulin and EpiPens and so forth. And of course, there's a spectrum. Minoxidil, Viagra, those are for-profit medications, as they should be, but as things become a little more life-saving and indispensable, I think that we as a society have to push back on how much profit we can really allow on those medications. And so I would be interested to learn if other states have done some sort of a pharmaceutical regulatory board, and how we could model that as we look towards legislation in the next sessions. In addition, the last speaker spoke eloquently about trying to limit direct-to-consumer advertising, and I would be interested to learn what our options are as a state in that regard, and if that can be regulated under First Amendment limitations. And then lastly, the egregious example of Paxil's abuse of its competitors in the generic market by GlaxoSmithKline was mentioned by the last speaker. The Department of Justice did sue GlaxoSmithKline and settled for billions of dollars for that very abuse. So that one was punished appropriately, but I think we need to continue to empower our attorneys general to pursue those types of cases. Mr. Chair.
Senator Klein, thank you very much for that very helpful summary, and I couldn't agree with you more. Perhaps we could turn to our legal, our writers, and Katie Kavanaugh and Mr. Dennis Albrecht, and ask if you could do some investigation in terms of specifically, are there any initiatives taken by any states right now in terms of direct-to-consumer marketing? And then also the issue of the Regulatory Commission. I think one of our presenters mentioned the Canadian system, but also referenced the fact that many countries do that. I think rather than try to recreate the wheel, if there's a way that we could tap into some efforts that are already being done, and if we could try, Andrea, to get some of that information that you might receive from Katie and Dennis out to the members of the committee in advance so we could talk about that and chew on that, I think that'd be helpful, and that would move us along as well. Clearly, we want to be a committee that hopefully can help set the table for a productive discussion and introduction of bills in 2018. Thank you again, Senator Klein. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the meeting is adjourned.